Hi, this is Tim of the WatchBox at Dubai Watch Week 2021 with veteran collector and Rolex scholar James Dowling. James, welcome to the show.
Love to be here. You guys are some of my favorite people.
So James, how do you define value in the Rolex world of today, and where do you go to find it?
It depends what you're looking for. I've got a bunch of watches here from my own collection, and one of them's a Rolex. One of them's an early Rolex. This is a Rolex Prince in 18 karat 2-color gold from 1927. When I started collecting about 30 years ago, this was the most desirable Rolex that money could buy. This and the bubble back were the two things that everybody looked for. This has real history. This was Rolex's first attempt to make a watch in high horology of the day. It was a very expensive watch. It was beautifully finished, unique case shape, unique case structure of two bimetallic gold stripes. Absolutely fabulous watch. 25 years ago, when I started collecting, or when I was starting to collect Princes, this watch was 25 to 30,000 pounds. Today, if I wanted to buy the same watch, I'd be looking at literally half of that, sort of between 12 and 14,000 pounds. The watch hasn't changed, the importance of it hasn't changed, and in fact, probably more have been scrapped, so there's probably fewer of them now. So you would think that the price of this would go up, but no, it hasn't. And that really covers something that isn't much talked about in this business, which is that watches are subject to the vagaries of fashion, that things come in and out of fashion. The first ever Rolex to sell for more at auction for more than $100,000 was a steel bubble back, $35.99 on an oyster bracelet. If you had it now, you'd be lucky to get 10 for it. So don't go chasing what everybody else is chasing. Look for the unusual. Look for the things that are out of the ordinary. Look for the things that are not fashionable. Because if you chase fashion, you're in a situation in which you are a buyer and there are more of you buyers than there is product. What you want to be looking for is areas where there is more product than buyers. So don't browse the first page on WatchBox, browse the 11th or 12th.
Appreciate the plug. So now it's fascinating because you're also a scholar of Rolex, and I felt for a long time that scholarship of Rolex pretty much stops at the beginning of the 80s. There are books written in enormous volume, voluminous tomes, about Rolex prior to the early 80s. What is the state of modern Rolex scholarship? Is anyone documenting the 5-digit and 6-digit watches at all?
When I started studying Rolex, in the early days, in the late 80s, I went to Bern in Switzerland to the Swiss Patent Library. I hired a interpreter who knew about watches, and we went through all the patents and registered designs and stuff, and I spent days there. Nowadays, everything's on the internet. You can access anything. I don't know if anybody's doing the kind of research that was done then. They're just doing it very differently. But what's happened in the recent years is that people aren't looking at what's happened with the construction of factories. They're not looking at the management changes or anything like that. They're looking at the different fonts on bezels. And that's become a big thing, is the minor details of the watches are being studied, whereas the bigger picture is being left to wither on the vine, so to speak.
I know you weren't the first person to own this watch, but I consider this an original discovery. You've got something on your wrist I've never seen. Could you explain this watch to me?
We're talking about red-headed stepchilds. This is the ultimate red-headed stepchild in Rolex. It's an Oysterquartz. I love it. I love the style of it. I love this is the strongest bracelet Rolex ever made. I mean, these are massive links. I mean, and they're solid. You know, there is,
Yes.
this is not a wimpy watch, but it's got a little, second hand goes clunk, clunk, clunk. So obviously it's worthless. Except, this is a prototype. In the 80s, Rolex submitted a patent for a prototype for a perpetual calendar wristwatch, quartz. To my knowledge, they went as far as making a number of prototypes of the movement, which they then fitted into standard cases. They made both a day date and a date just. The great thing about it is it not only is it a perpetual calendar, but it's a perpetual calendar that everything is controlled through the oyster crown. So there's no pushers, there's no way of ruining the water resistance of the watch. And okay, perpetual calendar is great, but for me the best thing about this watch is its jump hour facility. So you pull the crown out all the way. Second hand goes to stop, tells you it's there. You flip the thing once, and it goes straight round 1 hour. Close it back, and the second hand goes back to where it should be. Put the watch back on your wrist, and fine. It has a 10 to 12 hour battery, 12 to 12 year battery life. So with a perpetual calendar, instantaneous hour adjustment, and a 10-year plus battery life. This is literally a watch you don't touch. You don't have to do anything to it. And you have to do, you know, if daylight savings ends, flip it once. You travel somewhere else, flip it again. Other than that, stick it on your wrist and forget about it.
And you would never know just by looking at it, because even the reference under the bracelet is the same as the previous Oysterquartz.
They just took a regular case, put the movement in it, handed it to somebody to wear for a few months as a test, and then they forgot about it because the thing never went into production.
So just for our viewers who aren't familiar with this, how does a thing like that get from a prototype department to the public?
When I bought the first of the perpetual calendar day dates 8-10 years ago, maybe longer, I managed to, I discovered other people had them. You know, we became sort of this underground community of, I think, 4 of us who owned these things. And one of the guys decided that, you know, he was going to put it into auction, so see what happens. So he puts it into Antiquorum in Geneva. And a lot of people come and look at it, yada, yada, yada. And then the day before the auction, there's a writ served on Antiquorum from Rolex saying the watch has been stolen and that it has to be withdrawn from the auction. The case then goes to court. It took about 2 years to come to fruition. But in the end, the judge threw out Rolex's claim of theft for the simple reason that Rolex claimed the watch had disappeared from their possession something like 22 years previously. But Rolex had never filed a theft claim. But crucially, the auction house turned up people who had worked at Rolex who said it was common for unused prototypes just to be left on people's wrists and nobody ever asked for them back. So this, you know, there was a pattern of these things going out like that. The court case essentially screwed it up for Rolex because by suing Antiquorum, saying somebody has stolen their watch, they were actually saying this is a real watch and we made it. And suddenly it validated all the other prototypes that were out there. And bizarrely, it actually increased the value of them. Until recently, only earlier this month at Christie's in Geneva, one of the day dates sold for £250,000 Swiss francs. So yeah, they're out there. There are known to be about 6, but it's believed there are about 11 of the day dates. I believe there's a similar number of these out there, but the day dates look different because they're steel day dates and they never made a steel day date. This is a steel Datejust, and the only Datejust they made was steel. So this looks like every other normal steel Datejust. So I have a feeling that they're out there, and people have them, and they don't actually know what they are.
So if you find that oyster quartz Datejust, pull the crown, stop the action of the hands, 0 reset seconds to 60. You may have something there. So now you're a collector of many brands. You're not dogmatic. You like independence and you like weird stuff. So this is probably the second oldest watch on the table and possibly the weirdest of them all. Could you explain what this is?
I am brand agnostic. My Instagram name is Mr. Rolex, so you'd think that all I collected was Rolex. Not true. In fact, if there's a defining theme through my collection, and in many ways a defining theme through my life, it's my love of weird shit. So this was the first watch that was ever sold by Louis Vuitton, that famous Swiss watchmaker. They decided they were going to get into watches. The whole thing about Vuitton is they're about travel. So this is going to be the ultimate traveler's watch. So it incorporates 2 of Louis Cartier's great time-traveling patents, which were initially used by Patek. So it has the 24-hour world cities ring with the contra-rotating 24-hour disc, and it has double hour hands, which are independently adjustable, so you can have home time and away time. It has the best date mechanism I've ever seen on a watch. It looks like it's a retrograde, but it actually isn't. So you have this very thin gold hand with a red semicircle at the end, which encompasses the date. But it's 2 sides. So once it hits 31, then the other hand hits 1. The watch was designed by a lady architect from Italy called Gay Aulenti, who had never designed a watch before, and ironically, she never designed a watch again. She said, "I want it to look like a pebble that's been run over for centuries by the waters of the stream and just rubbed perfectly smooth." And other than the protrusion of the big crown at 12 rather than the conventional 3 position, it really is just like a pebble. It is utterly smooth. I mean, you run your fingers over it and there's no lugs.
It's beautifully intact too.
Yeah.
A lovely white gold tone.
Yeah.
This watch,
Enamel dial, moon phase.
completely lugless, as you can see.
This is not the original strap, obviously. The nice people at Vuitton are very respectful of their heritage, and they are making me a strap for it.
So
I only got this last month.
I was shocked when I saw this because, again, like the oyster quartz Datejust Generation 2, I've never seen it. I didn't know it existed. I learn a lot from you, and I also make mistakes because that is not the second oldest watch on the table.
Yeah.
This is right here.
Exactly.
Could you tell me a little bit about your Patek Philippe and what makes it special?
I talk about my collection being focused around weird shit, but there are themes to my collecting. And one of those themes is early quartz watches, because I believe that early quartz watches are tremendously important to the history of timekeeping and simultaneously utterly and completely ignored. And it's all, try and buy stuff that nobody else is buying. And right now, nobody else is buying, or very few people are buying early quartz. This is a watch from a consortium called CEH, who were attempting to make the world's first quartz-rich watch. It was a group of 18, 19 Swiss manufacturers who all got together with some electronics people, and they actually invented the world's first quartz wristwatch, and it gained a world record in timekeeping, and they were doing great. Everybody knows that Seiko beat them to the market. Seiko beat them to the market because Seiko is a monolithic firm. It's owned by one family. They just do something, they focus on it. The Swiss, unfortunately, had 18, 20 brands involved in this, and they had committees. And so they actually were the first to make a watch, but the Japanese were the first to get it to market. And the thing is that nobody respects coming in second. So Patek were one of the firms involved in the CEH project, and the movement that came out of it was called the Beta 21, and you see it now in quite a number of watches, and already some of them are becoming valuable. The Rolex white gold version using the Beta 21 is now a $100,000 watch in white gold. In yellow gold, it's 300. It's 30,000. This was an attempt by Patek to incorporate their heritage into what had to be a butch watch, because the Beta 21 movement is big.
Yes.
You know, it's discrete transistors and stuff like that. It's not a we think of quartz watches as being a chip on a piece of plastic. There's a lot of shit in there. So, and it has to fit, you have to have a big case to fit it. But what they did was they took their very elegant, very beautiful, slim, ellipse style of dial and fitted it onto this brick of a case. It has slightly curved edges, but essentially it is this big rectangle of white gold. And then they finished it off with an amazingly tactile, almost sinuous, but at the same time massive bracelet.
Integrated too.
Oh yeah. The vast majority of these watches, Patek think that the white gold ones are only made in single figures. There's only a couple of them on bracelets. Most of them are on leather straps. You know, I wear this on a regular basis because it saves me from having to do weight training.
I have to say, it's the heaviest quartz watch I've ever held in my life. I mean, really, this. If you cover up this dial-esque, 100 collectors, what are you looking at? I would say about 99 of them are going to say that's a Royal Oak. And the bracelet, I mean, it feels like a modern bracelet.
Yeah.
Older bracelets rarely feel this solid. Now, this watch is in great condition, but you can tell that this was made to last.
Yeah.
And the watch is a very soulful thing. It's got its own voice.
Yeah.
They hum like Accutrons. If you've never heard of Beta 21, it's a different tone, but it does have an audible sound. It's a hum. There's a glide to the seconds hand. It doesn't have the stepping seconds hand that you associate with quartz. This watch, in addition to everything else, is a rarity, because I've never seen one, and I've only encountered one Beta 21 Patek in my 7 years of doing this. So,
It's a beast.
it is a monster.
What you also have to understand is watches don't exist on their own. They're a function of society and the society around them, and an integral part of all society is economics. And part of the reason that watch is how it is that watch was made in the era when gold was $35 an ounce. So you don't care about throwing some more gold in there.
No, there's quite a few ounces here.
Yeah.
I mean, think, it's almost as heavy as a Platinum Daytona. If that's your reference, very close.
Yeah.
Now, this is interesting to me for its historic value, as is this, but
Yeah.
in the modern era, we have a lot of haute horlogerie options, some of which come from within larger groups, some of which are independent. Sticking with Louis Vuitton, could you tell me a little bit about this? Because this is another first for me.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody can see my shoes. They're in a color called Incline Blue, which was, as far as I know, until Ashok Kumar patented Vanta Black, this is the only color that's ever been patented by an artist. And I just love it. It has that ultramarine color to it. I love it. So when I first saw this watch at Baselworld in 2014, I was immediately knocked out by the dial. And I just thought, that's so, that is just really in your face. And then I picked the watch up and I just knocked out by the density of it. It doesn't have a bracelet, and yet it weighs almost as much as the Patek with a bracelet. And I looked at the dial and I thought, what does it do? And then it was explained to me, it's a split-second chronograph, but not as we know it, Jim. Split-second chronographs have one dial, a couple of registers, and 3 buttons. And the 3 buttons have to be pressed in a particular order, and you finish up with 2 times, and then you subtract one from the other, and you get the split difference between the two. This was designed for the Louis Vuitton Cup, which was the which was the trials for the America's Yachting Cup. And it's always two yachts against one another. And their races are up to like 25 minutes. So this can time two competitors in an event of up to 1 hour. And it is an incredibly complex watch that is incredibly simple for the user. So when the starter of the race fires the gun, you just press your one button. The sweep second hand is to do with timing. It's nothing to do with the chronograph. So once this hand starts, the two registers start. And you see now the outer red hand and the inner white or silver hand which stays there. That's the minute register. So now we have two yachts racing together. One of them crosses the line, we press this button, and this one stops. We wait a bit more, the second one crosses the line, we press the button again, and this one stops. So now we have the first time, the second time, and the key thing is this register up here shows the split between the two.
And explain to our audience how this is achieved, because the back of the watch is mental.
Yeah, so, and then you press the button once again, and it resets everything. So essentially, a split-second chronograph, a conventional split-second chronograph, is a quite small module on top of a normal column wheel chronograph. And that's why, essentially, it's an adapted normal watch. So you have to play around with the buttons to make this whole thing work. What they did here was they made life really simple for the user and really complicated for the watchmaker. So what they did was this has 4 complete escapements and balances. So there are 3 for each of the wheels and 1 for the movement itself. So if we look here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4.
And the fourth one is at center.
Yeah, the fourth one is the center. The watch has something like 500 parts. It has 80 jewels, and bizarrely, it's water resistant to 100 meters, which I certainly wouldn't want to jump in the water with this strap, but it is anything you could want. And the story behind this watch is hilarious. As I say, I saw it at Basel on the first day and just thought, this is phenomenal. Then they showed me how it worked, and I thought, this is amazing. I've never seen such a dense watch. This is just full of parts. There isn't a square centimeter of air in there.
The watch literally could not be any smaller. It's big because of what's in it.
This is it, mate. So I said, look, I want one. I have to have one. This is like this watch has my name. I want this. The one thing I've learned when you're buying a watch, particularly from an independent, and believe me, the Vuitton factory, La Fabrique de Temps, is an independent in the same way as they're smaller than Francois Pauljon for a start. So I was waiting, and then I heard that some of them had already reached clients. So I called my friend at Vuitton and said, so when's my watch due to be delivered? And she said, oh, you were serious? I said, yeah, you're damn right I was serious. I wrote whole pieces in Time Zone about it, how I was looking forward to it and all this stuff. Oh my God, we've sold them all. Let me let me see what I can do. So, if you go online and Google the Louis Vuitton twin match racing chrono, you'll see lots of pictures of the watch being assembled, and a final picture shows them putting the movement into the very last watch, number 30 of 30. And that's the watch that they were keeping for themselves. And it's the watch that finished up on my wrist.
And so it is. A watch that could not possibly be any smaller. It is literally full of its movement. And I'll add, one thing we didn't mention about the dial is, as extraordinary as the color is, it is Grand Faux enamel over a hobnail guilloche base, so it's also a flinqué enamel. This watch exhausts superlatives, and of course it's got that signature Louis Vuitton tambour case profile with Vendôme lugs. Very impressive, and yet it gets even sportier.
Yep.
This is a watch from a man who only makes about 20 watches a year, and it came out in 2018. That was just about a year before we last met.
Yeah.
You didn't have it then. Why did you buy it, and what can you tell us about it now?
I've known Carsten for 15 or 18 years. I first met him when he was working with a new young brand called Heritage Watch Manufacturing. And they were making some of the most bizarre things, but the stuff he was doing was just knocked me out. And so, again, it's another one of those situations. I said to them, look, I want one. Let me know when you get them into production. I'll buy one. Unfortunately, after about 3 years, they never made it, and it fell apart. Carsten went on to do his main job. His main job, in fact, is building prototypes for other manufacturers. If you speak to him, he'll tell you the names of the people he's worked for. I don't think it's up to me, because some of them are very famous, and you get the impression that they do everything themselves. Actually, they didn't. But anyway, then I ran into him again with a new brand at Basel, which was Leroy. They'd resurrected the great French name. This time, there wasn't really a possibility of running out of money, because he was funded by a giant group called Festina Watch Company, Spanish, probably more famous for having drugged bicycle riders in the Tour de France than they are for watches.
Oh yeah, the 1998 Tour.
Yeah. Nevertheless, Festina said, go ahead, let's do it. And he designed the first wristwatch to use the Robin chronometer escapement. And it was stunning. Guilloche dials, very restrained case. It was absolutely gorgeous. And so once again, I said, let me know when you make that. I want one. And what do you know, Festina, when it came down to it, Festina decided they didn't want to put the money into it, and they probably thought it was too wide a gap from where they were to where this was going to be. They were making 35 to 150 euro watches, and this was going to be a 75,000 euro watch. So I don't know why, but they pulled the plug. About 4 years ago, I ran into Carsten again at a watch show, and he brought out the first one of these, and I saw it and I loved it. And I kept saying to him, I loved the Leroy. It was such a great watch. I'm so pissed off that it never happened. And he said, strange, I still have one of the prototypes. He designed all the parts, but he hadn't made them. This was a watch where all the parts had been assembled, but they actually weren't meant to be assembled. These were parts which are going to be patterns, and they weren't made from hardened steel. They were made from normal soft steel, and so the thing just kept failing. He was really embarrassed, and so he suggested I have one of these in its place. And so I bought this because I love it. It's visually different from every other tourbillon, because there's no tourbillon cage. They're just counterweights on the end of a rod. But the key difference between his watches and everybody else's is that he builds his watches in a way that nobody builds wristwatches at all. Wristwatches are built with plates and bridges. Pocket watches and clocks are built with plates and pillars. And then the components are suspended in between the pillars, in between the plates, with the pillars distancing them. And this is the only wristwatch I know of which is literally on pillars. And the only pillars you actually see are these two which are holding the tourbillon bridge up. It is a wonderful combination of ancient and modern horological design and techniques. I love the sportiness of it. I love its massiveness. It makes no pretenses about being a little watch. It's pretty in your face, and this freaking great hole with a tourbillon in the middle tells you this is a tourbillon. But what I love about it is that he doesn't do a display back, at least not on this one. It's it's there. That's it. It's quite restrained in its style, simple sunburst style, big quarter numbers, giant, beautifully machined tourbillon bridge. And what I love about it, of course, is this is number 5. Very Chanel.
Snap. I think it's important to mention it's even 1000 Gauss anti-magnetic. That is a very durable tourbillon. The balance structure, and I'm calling it a structure because it's not a wheel, it's big enough and heavy enough it looks like it would chop your finger off if you stuck it in there. That is an everyday tourbillon wristwatch in steel.
Once again, it's somebody whose work I like and admire and want to support, and it's a guy who's and he's a maverick. You know, he's not your everyday watchmaker. All of which appeals to me because I'm not your everyday watch nut.
That's a fact. Never change.
I love your Sin.
Thank you so much.
Which one is it? It's the AR, so it's a later one. Yeah.
Oh yeah. This isn't the original EZM one. It's the 1.1. On the other hand, this watch can be gouged and scraped with a key and not leave a mark. So sometimes newness has its advantages.
It's still got the copper crystal thing in the lug.
Oh, very much. It's got the AR dehumidification. It's got tegumented steel. It's got the captive bezel. That's the only watch I've been wearing since 2018. I guess I'm horologically monogamous, unlike this guy. James, thank you so much.
Tim, it's always a pleasure. Thank you.